You know the Magna culture, right? Nobody works for me. You people work with me. I'm working for you. The history of mankind has always been dominated by the golden rule. Here's the gold makes the rule. But I don't want to be dominated by anyone. If I feel that strong, I should not be able to dominate somebody either.
Hello there, welcome back. I'm Richard Dolan in conversation with our very own Frank Stronach, a celebrated entrepreneur, a philanthropist, someone who's reinvented, reimagined industry, thinking, and even business philosophy. And that's precisely why we're sitting with him today, in not just any conversation, but a courageous conversation, as we delve deep into his thinking and methodology that was breeded out of decades of his own life's work, found in the embodiment of a company, Magna. Frank, how are you, my friend?
Well, hi, Richard. Yeah, always look forward chatting with you
So do
about
I.
interesting projects.
It gives us both a great excuse to get dressed up and do our hair, don't you say?
Well, we do up our hair pretty well every day, and somewhere along the line, you got to get dressed.
Well, I thought I'd start off on a light note because there's nothing light about what we're going to talk about today. As you know, and as our viewers know, we've been in conversations around your life and legacy for some time. We've talked a bit about your Charter of Economic Rights and Responsibilities, a economic stand for Canada's future and those within it. We've talked a lot about just not only your humble beginnings, but the lessons it's taught you. But today we're specifically talking about really the genesis for what's being known as the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship. And it makes me so happy to know that you've decided to launch this. And it's not a new initiative. It's a new mission that's based on old technology, thinking that you imagined back in the 70s and 80s, which we've come to know as the Fair Enterprise Institute. It was the embodiment of your business philosophy, which you called Fair Enterprise. In fact, to represent you to a statement you once made, and if I may, and for our listeners, I want them to know, when you referenced Fair Enterprise, you actually spoke of the citizen, the Canadian citizen. And let me share what you wrote. You said, we as people must have a clear vision of what constitutes an ideal society. You wrote, Frank, that since a society is made up of individuals, an ideal society can strive to accommodate the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations of its citizens. You went on to say that people possess a strong desire, just like you did when you first immigrated here to Canada in the early 50s, to have individual freedom, which essentially means each of us has a right to choose our road to happiness. Tell me, Frank, why is it so impeccably important to your life and legacy to see what you created and put into practice, fair enterprise, thinking, planning, doing in today's times? Please.
So when we look back, society came a long way, from the caveman to the hunter and hunted, to the kings and the servants. And now we have what I would call an environment of bosses and disgruntled employees, right? So anyway, when we are younger, we all hustle a bit to make some monies that you can live in dignity. But as you get older, you know, you sit back and you think about it. What's the purpose of life, right? So I came to the conclusion: the purpose of life is, can you make a contribution to a better society, right? And I was fortunate enough that I was on the board of quite a few universities, right, in the States, in Canada, in Europe. And so over the last 10, 15 years, you reflect. And so we came to the conclusion that I asked myself, what is the purpose of a university? The purpose of a university, as far as I'm concerned, is to teach young people how can you have a more civilized society, okay? And so universities would actually be the ideal places where we could work on structures which would lead to an ideal society, because somewhere along the line, we need a blueprint, we need a structure. Otherwise, we'll never find the ideal society, right? So that is very important. So I can, as a, call it as a lead in, because basically today we would like to talk about the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, right?
Mm.
And so I'm very happy that I can talk to you about it. And I think so. We put the setting where and how. Then let's talk about it.
I love that, Frank. And it's a great segue into what I think people need to know is that this is just not another rich fella's passion project. This isn't just another billionaire's project. I mean, Frank, you're of an age where you can live anywhere in the world. Some people might even be thinking, why isn't he golfing? Why isn't he riding his horses, tending to his farms, or just living it up on a beach somewhere? And I have to say to any of those folks who are just watching and thinking that your life has meaning and you wish to make an impact beyond the years that you're here. And I want to get to a point about what catalyzed Fair Enterprise. What catalyzed it was a scenario that unfolded that many people may not have heard, which was based on your humble beginnings. You built Magna. Your foreman grew disgruntled because he knew he could be more than he was to you at that time inside that company and corporate structure. And rather than quitting and moving on, you decided to find a way for him to emulate what you thought of and what you did to create wealth and to share wealth. You made Herman, if I have that correctly, your first foreman, you taught him how to create a partnership mind through fair enterprise practice. Now, I want to go back to something that you wrote. You wrote here on the subject of fair enterprise, Frank, that it's an economic philosophy, which by the way, is so profound because many people who've read your books, whether The Greed Factor or Magna Man, have come to believe, sense, and experience you as a business philosopher. So I'm happy that you call the fair enterprise an economic philosophy, but let me continue. You said that it's an economic philosophy that's designed to create a much fairer and broader based distribution of profits. Tell me, why was it so important to you to share the profits with Herman? For Fair Enterprise to have been born in that moment, what got you to do that?
The simple fact is, when you're hungry, okay, and not hungry because you wanted to lose weight, hungry because you got no money to buy food. This leaves a very deep impression, So when you do well and you sit back, and sometimes I live on a farm just a little north of Toronto. Got a beautiful forest behind there, especially on the weekends. On Sundays, I went for a walk where we sat down on a tree stump, counted my blessings and said, gee, life's been so great to me. But at the same time, I always say, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If the stars are not aligned, it won't work. So many things worked for me because the stars were aligned, and life is really a question to be at the right places at the right time with the right ingredients. Then lots of great things could come from it. So anyway, that was sort of my thinking. What can we do to eliminate poverty, right? Because poverty means a lot of things, from being hungry and leads to crime, leads to thing here. It's so the very key is to eliminate poverty.
Well, and I have to say that as I've continued these conversations with you, which are not only an esteemed privilege, it's so profound. And thank you, Frank. Just for the record, every time I come out of a conversation with you, I learn something new about you, what it means to be an instrument for impact, and I learned something new about myself. So I just want to make sure you know that from the bottom of my heart. I'm grateful. But as I write notes to myself, as you're saying things, aiming for a civilized society, leaving a blueprint, a structure, a system, eliminating poverty. This doesn't sound like the language of a billionaire. This sounds like the language of someone who's really being, in your words, a responsible citizen. Has being responsible eluded today's business owner, you find, given the current rate and environment we're in?
I think we don't focus enough, We look. I know a lot of people, right? Rich ones, poor ones, politicians, business. So I know a lot. Most people are okay, but it's maybe too wrapped up in the day-to-day affairs and things. So I think sometimes you got to take a bit of time out and say, gee, what do we have to do? What's wrong? How come we are not civilized? When you think the way we keep animals, right? The pigs or chickens, pigs are locked up in small boxes, right? And so a chicken, I mean, it's incredible, the cruelty, right? I mean, we are so far away from a civilized society, right? So we should talk about that, right? And so about 12 years ago, I decided, I reflected and I said, Frank, you've been blessed with a good mind and good health.
And good hair?
And good hair, bushy hair. And I said to myself, gee, I think I should do something else. And I decided I've done extremely well to creating the automobile business, right? And I decided maybe I should do something else where society would benefit better, you know, through my knowledge and my accumulated wisdom, right? I decided to go into the food business, right? In agriculture. And the more I got into it, the more I could see this huge chemical jungle.
Well, when you observe it that way, I mean, it's really haunting to think of the reflection that you endured and the observations that you made. I mean, any historian that studies you, Frank, would often see that over the past 20 years, what might appear as a distraction for you, a billionaire, an industrialist, someone who radically reinvented the way auto parts and their manufacturing was just done. You built a multi-billion-dollar business that has a market cap today of over $40 billion. I would have to beg them to pause and say, these weren't observations of a retiring or a slowing man. You were getting very reflective. You're becoming very empathetic. You were really taking stock of the impact we were making as capitalists in this world, in this time, during your life here. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree. I would like to make a few more remarks because we should focus on the academy, which we are planning to opening soon.
Which we'll get to. But I want to make sure that folks, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I need to, because a big part of the academy, Frank, and I want to say this humbly, is really not just based on your history. It's not just based on your philosophy. It's based on all of that magic and all of that track record and all of the results you produce for thousands of people, tens of thousands of investors from around the world who you've turned from nothing to something financially. More millionaires were made in the era in which you led Magna than ever before in any other industry. So I want people to understand, and I humbly submit this to you, that the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship is not just based on the fair enterprise way of thinking and philosophy, and known as an institute in its time, but it really is the lead up into our Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. It's a segue into a new way of us viewing an ideal society. Is that fair?
Yes, but you see, when from time to time you got to look around, you got to absorb, and you should think about it and you assess things. So I thought about it. How come, so many kids, practically all the kids have allergies, stage 2 diabetics, etc., etc. So that's why I thought maybe I should go into agriculture and see, can we do things better? And I came to the conclusion, as I said before, it's a huge chemical jungle. When we think about 95% of the food eaten in North America comes from industrial farms. In industrial farms, you see no more eagles fly. Why? There's no more pheasants. There's no more rabbits. We spray so much pesticides and fungicides, we practically kill everything here. So this is a major, major concern when I see, that all the kids have allergies and stage 2 diabetics is rising. So it's amazing. So I'd like to highlight what Yeah, what are the major concerns when a couple gets married? They pray, I hope my kids grow up healthy, right?
Yes.
But this way, the kids, yes, the rich people they're more concerned. They're aware you should eat organic food or feed your kids organic food. But I think we want to have a Canada where every kid should have an equal chance to grow up happy and healthy, right? That's so I sidetracked a bit, but let's go back. The academy would teach about things not only just about monies, but what can we do to have a better world.
Well, let me backstop you, because what you said was profound. What we're doing in these conversations is really unearthing the thinking of Frank Stronach that gave rise to some of these great initiatives that are going to impact our society powerfully. I made note here of what you reference as a chemical jungle when you observed what was happening in our world environmentally. I would assert that perhaps there's also a chemical jungle of the mind. That's why you've been a great advocate of evolutions of the mind. That's why you've published books the way you have. You've stood for the creation of the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. This is why, and we arrive to the conversation at hand, why the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship is so important. Let me underpin something. When we've sat down prior to this interview, we chatted, if you recall, over a glass of coconut water, one of our favorites. Second behind that would be beet juice and maybe a coffee with some cookies, but that's till the afternoon. And we were talking about the model of fair enterprise. And you showed it to me. And for anyone that isn't seeing it now, and perhaps should we do this in post-edit, that we will have a beautiful superimposed image of it up on the screen if we may. And that's a little poke at Stephen and our lead producer of the show. But with that being said, is at the very top is society. And what holds it up in your account is everything from capital to people and to the business, but the base, the foundation that holds up fair enterprise thinking and business is government. Why is government so important to the fair enterprise way of thinking?
Well, government basically is the management team of a country, okay? And if the management team is not capable, then you got a problem, right? So there are major problems, right? But still the key is it's the economy. The economy. The one thing politicians agree, business people agree, and most people agree, if the economy doesn't work, nothing else will work. So you cannot feed the hungry if the economy doesn't work. You cannot look after the most fragile people, the elderly, the sick, and the handicapped. And we do not talk about the most important subject. It's the economy. The economy. We do not talk. It's strange, right? So the economy, we gotta realize the economy is driven by three forces: smart managers, hardworking employees, and investors. The message I want to get across loud and clear is, without workers, you can't make a profit. Workers have a moral right to some of the profit. I'm not talking to take away from the rich people. All what I'm pleading is, we must let workers participate in baking the economic pie. And in this case, the economic pie will be a lot bigger, and everybody wins. The rich would win, the workers would win, but most of all, we could uphold in God that we have a free society.
That's wonderful that you say that, because I'm going to give you a very unusual entry point into the next conversation that brings us to why the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship works so well. Our executive producer, Ivana, she shared with me a quote that we don't hear very often from you, Frank. So when we get an original line of thinking, we take note. So she was very delightful and she printed it for me. And I want to share it with you. Here's what she captured you saying. And I quote you, Frank, that children are amiss. It doesn't seem the kids shoot for higher goals. There's nothing there for them. The environment has changed. And before you had a person who climbed up from nothing, a guiding light, it's not there, not anymore. The odd sports player, like an NHL player, gets drafted, but nowhere else you see this. There's no guiding lights, you said. There's so much red tape and rules, you can't get out. You're trapped in the system. trapped in a system where you don't see someone rise anymore. Everything is held down. There is no hope. When you speak of the workers, I think that SAFE was created to ensure that we spoke to three bodies of people that make up the workers. Those just getting started, that could include students or those who are just humbly getting started because they're newly arriving Canadians. Those who are well on their way but need to scale, need systems, need the blueprint, or those that are reaching out for succession, life after what comes next. I want to focus on the workers though. Why did you say that there is a sense of people being trapped in the system? Frank, talk to me about this.
Well, it's not only people are trapped in the system, even politicians are trapped in the system, right? When I run Magna, a company with 180,000 employees and 40 billion in sales, I had a great board with a lot of great people, right? I had practically the former prime minister and
heads
the
of state.
premiers, yeah, but
Of
pretty
course.
well, pretty well everybody was, and we have a system now where when you come forward with something new, you could be criticized. So I know the older politicians say to the younger politicians, you can't say that. If you bring forward something new, we can be criticized. We won't win. That's the dilemma. Okay, so we have to change the system.
So I need to be rude and interject here. And I think for the production team that's even in this room that's listening, and I want to underscore this for everyone watching this video, is that if we talked like this before, Frank, we're talking at a time in history where Donald J. Trump is the 47th president of the United States. And if there's anything that we've learned by him winning the Electoral College and 35% of the voters, is that you could say anything in the spirit of leadership. And I think what's cracked open is that we've now started to notice that it's becoming socially far more acceptable to actually say, you know what, you're right. You should speak your mind. You should express how you really feel. And I want to say this for the record, Frank, many years have gone by where I have found members of our own society and media making you wrong for speaking your mind, standing up for what you believe in, whether you ran for politics in your homeland of Austria or whether you stood up against a board. I mean, something about speaking on your own terms based on your own values sounds like it's one of the principles of just good entrepreneurial thinking. Would you not agree?
Yeah, it can come back to the economy. If you know how the economy works, you can understand how people works, right? What drives people, right? Like if workers know they get a portion of the profits in a tangible way, you change the life of workers because they're on the front line. They know how to make things. But if they know right now, in most cases, the playing field's not level, then they're disgruntled, and it seems people have given up all the way through. There's no hope that you can break out of your daily routine and have a better life, right? So we gotta get, 60, 70, 80 years ago, when the free enterprise system was you might say, was blooming, right? When I built my first factory, I mentioned a few times that I'm a tool and die maker by trade. I put a sign up on a small factory, tool and die business, open for business. I didn't have to go any place. I didn't know. It worked great. We gotta get back to, but now we got so many regulators. We got more regulators than people which like to make things, right? They prevented from regulators to make things. It's so full. We gotta get back. We gotta get back. I think Canada and the United States were in great shape about 60, 70, 80 years ago, right? There was a concern for the environment. There was a concern for safety. I think it was different. Now we have everything is micromanaged.
What it lands for me, and I'm making note of it as you just finished that thought, and I want to just go to another quote that was provided to me by our executive producer, Ioana. And you said it best. You said, history has shown that individual freedom without economic freedom has limited value. And therefore, an ideal society must include the means to enable its citizens to attain economic freedom. You know, I think more now than ever before, Frank, after all the conversations we've had and all the years I've known you, you've spoken so much about the evolution of the mind, the evolution of the mind. But I sense there's also a bit of a revolution of the entrepreneur. So the evolution, which begins in the mind, I feel like there's a revolution underway. And I really have a sense, dear friend, that SAFE, the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, is leading the charge. Would you agree with this sentiment of mine?
Well, that's what we hope to, and that's why we like to bring forward a new way how the economy should work. The economy, not only for a few people, but for the majority of people, right? So it's again, I gotta say, it's the economy, and it's a shame, right? That Canada is basically a relative civilized society, but we got to question, we got to ask ourselves, how come there's only such a small percentage which is economically free?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not economically free, you're not a free person. Now, that's a strong statement to make, to be economically free. So let me, there are minimum standards, right? Call it the minimum standards of being economically free would be if a Canadian woman or a Canadian man worked for 30 years, that they've accumulated that they would own a house or a small condo without a mortgage. And they would have enough, or would have at least, I should say, $300,000 in the bank to supplement their old age pension, and thereby they can choose a happy road to their future, right?
I like that. Well, and I mean, one of the things that I don't believe that people will be watching and hearing is what you're creating is not just a vision for economic sovereignty for all people, but a vision for their financial futures that not many people have. I mean, you started from a very humble beginning where you started with, I don't want to be hungry anymore. That was the vision for you. And you've come a long way from that. So for anybody, Frank, and I say this as both your student and your friend and the champion of all things Stronach, is that having a vision for people 30 years from now saying you deserve to own your own home, mortgage free, you deserve to have $300,000 in the bank. And if you don't, then we at the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship will help you either start a business, build a business, so you can create revenues or residual and passive income to perhaps supplement this vision. I like that angle, especially while we have baby boomers turning 75 every 7 seconds in our country. Frank, it's never too late to start a business. Would you agree?
It's well. Hopefully we can open the doors of freedom a little more. Open the doors. The regulators, they want to put padlocks on, right? So let's see there's no padlocks and just start open things and do. That's what we got to do. But why at the university, not the university, the academy, the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, we like to bring forward that we can open the doors, that it should be doable if we band together, right? So the academy basically brings forward. The academy is basically based on the philosophies of the fair enterprise system. And the fair enterprise system basically says, look, workers gotta get a cut of the profits, right? That's the essence of it. And so I think the university is designed that we could be helpful to students which have graduated from high school, colleges, or universities, or have graduated a year, 2 years, but they still haven't found the right things, what they would like to pursue. So it's geared towards that, and then it's also geared towards small business, which are ready how to become a big business, right? Okay, so that's what the university is geared for, and as a role model, we can show how did Magna grow, right? From a one-man shop, right, to 180,000 people, right? There was there were situations. It's an evolutionary process, and we will teach that evolutionary process, which will be helpful to a lot of people to build their own businesses and enhance entrepreneurship.
You know, as we're deep in the second half of this conversation, it's amazing how time flies when I'm having fun with you. I do want to point something out, and this might just be my own revelation, Frank, is that, and tell me if I'm onto something. If government is the foundation to fair enterprise thinking, yes, the government is everything. Part of where the regulatory oversight is, where the red tape exists, where people have the experience of feeling shackled, pinned down, or as you said, trapped in a system. If we equip entrepreneurs with the right thinking, the right thoughts, so that they're equipped to ask the right questions, they can press their constituencies, their representatives at the municipal levels, at the provincial levels, and dare I say at the federal levels, to start asking for the things they need, they deserve to achieve their own economic sovereignty, one Canadian household at a time. I believe that's the undertow, like the undertow to the water, to the movement, to the wave of your mission. Would you agree that if we were to equip every Canadian in our country who wishes to create for themselves an entrepreneurial based life, that they'll learn to ask of their government the things that they need so that they can build a business in a very economic, friendly, and empowering way?
Well, it's when you have a management which runs a large business,
Mm-hmm.
they they have to have a framework and a goal and how and what, right? Okay, and most large businesses don't work too well, right? Because the workers are too disgruntled, right? Okay, and it's maybe run by people which haven't got a lot of experience. But the same thing holds true for the government. The government is really the management of people, right? And so every housewife knows she cannot spend more than what her husband brings in. Otherwise, otherwise they wind up in a poorhouse. Every farmer knows he cannot spend more than what he gets for the crops. Otherwise, he loses the farm. Every small business person knows, man or woman, they cannot spend more than what the profits they make. So governments, in order for politicians to be elected, they spend money is printed like crazy, right? They mean the budgets. Look, we don't talk about it. How can we pay back the trillions what on debt we own now? It's grossly negligence, right? So that's why the economic charter would limit the politicians. Politicians must have balanced budgets, right? And so, but that's businesses have to be taught. A business is there to enhance not only the shareholders, but also enhance the life of workers, right?
Absolutely.
To find balance, to find it's balance, right? That people got. That's why we call it a fair enterprise. Is it fair? Should you share a little less, a little more, right? So basically, that's why it's called fair, right? So there has to be, as a company's got to have some guidelines. A government needs guidelines too. That politicians should not be able to spend monies and have not balanced budgets. That's one of the first things. That's a must.
Well, I love that a big part of fair enterprise includes government. So a function of fair enterprise thinking and business management includes our greatest partner, which is government. But I'll share with you a personal observation. This is personal. As we're in conversation with you, Frank Stronach, you know, of late we're going through a time of turbulent tariff warfare. The U.S. government has waged tariffs onto Canadians for various reasons, some of which is all around the redefinition of our sovereignty, our border lines that have been drawn, fentanyl that crosses the borders unprotected and unsanctioned, and the list goes on. But here's what I want to say, is that as we look at Canadians who've band together, there's been a battle cry of elbows up, so to speak, a hockey analogy, elbows up, gloves off. You look at how Canadians are now struggling to stay together economically. One observation, here it comes, my friend. We're both no strangers to the occasional glass of wine, yes? We don't mind a glass of white Chardonnay from time to time, you and I. And what I'm mystified by, as Canadians have boycotted liquor, spirits, from the Americas coming into Canada, interprovincial trade doesn't exist. So our British Columbia winemakers can't necessarily ship freely across our own Canadian borders interprovincially. There's provincial taxes from province to province. This behooves me. I think to myself, are we all not Canadian? Why is it that BC wines can't pass through Alberta territory, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba to arrive to me in Ontario? And you start to realize, is the government really helping small business owners, even in this time of crisis, or are they really just looking out for the tax base, their own controls, what's good for them as a governing force, rather than inducing collaboration? Because it feels like it's more about compliance, not collaboration. Would you agree?
Yes, it is, but it's, look, as the president of the United States, he made some comments that the United States has subsidized so many countries, including Canada. Canada should have said, right, when it's still not too late to say, look, let's sort out where we had an advantage or where we were subsidized. Let's limit it. Let's eliminate that, right? And so I think it's the number one thing is, I've always seen Canada and the United States as the custodian of a free society, right? And so we have to be, we can only make the things work if we work together as neighbors, right? So we should have a hold, right? And the United States should be willing to say, look, if we eliminate the preferences or the advantages, then we should let's freely trade. So that would be. I don't think it's too late yet, but if we say if we do that, tit for tat. I think it would be a disaster, right? I still think it's we could fix it by establishing where did we get preferences, and we got to eliminate that.
And so I love that you said that, because in alignment to the Fair Enterprise Federation philosophy and institute, one of the things that you talk about is the public policy advocacy. Like, if we can teach people what they should know, how they can go about building their business, how to think like an entrepreneur, just like you did over the decades that you did, we can equip them with the right kind of inquiry and questions, so that we're not here advocating the revolution of turning over a government or to rethink government. No. What we're saying is it's an evolution of the mind. If we can equip entrepreneurs to think for themselves and understand what to ask for, we can put the rightfully due pressures on our leaders of government to say, this is what I need to build a business, to employ people, to pay taxes, to be a powerful and profitable force in my community, supporting fellow and neighboring businesses. I think this is the spirit of the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship. Do you agree?
The academy, the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, basically what we want to teach is, first of all, we got to teach from experience.
That's right.
From a role model, right? In a tangible way. We teach, if you share with the employees, who will be making more monies. Like, I mean, that's an easy thing. And the country will be better off, right? Because it's not, you not only share the monies with the workers, but also share with society, right? Because the stakeholders in the companies are the investors, for the shareholders, the workers, the managers, and the country. Okay, because as a business, you should have, portion of the profits should go as a charity to the various towns you have businesses located. So this academy basically from practical experiences, and we have a great example. What we try to is to accumulate all the experiences we gained from that, and so I think the academy would be of a great help to would-be entrepreneurs and existing small businesses to grow larger and become big businesses.
Love that. Final component of our conversation, which always goes so quickly, Frank. As a fellow member of your executive leadership team for the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, I've had the profound honor of being in business for myself for over 30 years. And I've often given you incredible kudos for having inspired me to be one. When I first met you at the age of 16 years of age, I was in a classroom whereby in grade 9, I was in a business class where you were assigned to our classroom as our business mentor. Now, having grown up in York Region, you were a rock star of our time. You came in with a full head of white hair, you had an entourage, and they didn't even know what one looked like. And they were all very established people, parts of your executive team.
It wasn't white hair, it was baby blonde hair.
It was baby blonde hair. And I remember being moved not just by the astounding story, the earth-shattering numbers, but just the air you carried in yourself. So I'm really privileged to sit here as a living demonstration of that early inspiration. Now, here's what I want to say. When I look to your statement, when anyone in the world right now with a phone can erect a body of curricula, they can teach anything, inspire people on social media, on TikTok. Heck, anyone can open up a school if they want, but very few are role models like you. What I want to say to our viewers and those listening to this conversation is that not only did you start a business, not only did you scale a business, you also planned out your succession. And succession, not just as its early adaptation where it was about putting someone in place of you. It was also a financial succession. And no matter how you use it, view it, and or critique it, you did it successfully. In other words, you had a beginning and you've had an end. Frank, tell me this. How important to you at this stage in your life is it to remain a powerful role model for every aspiring entrepreneur?
Well, people have ends, right? But philosophies should never die. Philosophies are the basic lifeblood for society, right? So you gotta have the right philosophy, right? So, and you need the right structures, which when we observe nature always looks for balance, okay? So we just have to copy nature, right? Then life goes on forever, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we have to be more careful about the planet. We got to be more careful about the environment, about many things, right? But we could do it if we think the right way, if we try to copy nature, right? There's a lot of things we can do.
I love that. I'll say this on behalf of all of your viewers, all of your students, all of your fans, and those who've been following you. Those who've been your employees, your co-workers at the executive levels right down to the factory floors, the near 200,000 plus employees that you gave life to economically. A big thank you. Thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for being a leading example. They would say, Frank Stronach, thank you for championing innovative thinking that led us to be the world's largest and best at what we do. To all those who say that to you, Frank, what would you say to them?
Well, it would be great if we could arrive on a consensus. What do we have to do to eliminate poverty? I think the fair enterprise system is basically, it would be fair to think here, right? Mm. We could eliminate poverty, and that should be the goal of society, of all people.
Now, Frank, my dear friend, for all those people you've touched, I've been asked to thank you on their behalf, to them on camera right now with me, what would you say to them as they thank you profoundly, humbly, gratefully, with gratitude? What do you say to them?
Well, again, I say hopefully that some of their dear or accumulated know-how will be of great help, and you could say I made a contribution to a better society.
Wow. You're a humble man, my friend. I get moved every time I sense it, I see it, I witness it. So thank you for being such.
Great. Look forward to the next session.
Folks, this has been Richard Dolan in conversation with Frank Stronach, our very own billionaire, who's teaching you on how to build a business the billionaire way. No small feat, I have to say. If you want to learn more about the Stronach Academy for Entrepreneurship, please write us. And if you want to get involved in the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, we'd love to hear from you, as it's collectively our responsibility and equally an opportunity to make this Canada yours again.